Alright, what's going on, guys? With all the current hype around Elden Ring DLC, out of everything we know about it, it seems we have more questions than answers, primarily pertaining to the story and lore of what we're going to be playing. But the one question that seems to persist more than any other at the moment is what level should you be in order to tackle the challenges in the DLC? Because there is a fine line that needs to be established, and the level of your character can make or break your experience. And it's no secret that Elden Ring has been plagued by people significantly overleveling their characters to the point where they're scared they're going to cheat themselves out of the experience, and on the other side of the coin, players that are worried they're going to go in too low of a level to where they're not going to be able to handle all the new threats in Shadow of the Erdtree. But we do now know that this DLC is going to be different than anything we've played in the past, with a new leveling system in place that's going to function very differently than what we're used to. So we're going to break all of that down today and determine what level ranges will give you what kind of experience so that you can decide which one you want to tackle and how you want it to go for you. So as we begin today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring DLC and enjoy the lore and discussion, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. Before we start talking about level ranges, let's establish a few things. Elden Ring works in a similar way to other open world RPGs, where every area of the map has its own level scaling. For example, the recommended level for Limgrave is around 10 to 20, while you should be around level 60 once reaching Altus Plateau, and then anywhere from 100 to 150 when rolling the credits. So staying at these ranges provides an optimal experience where the game still feels hard but fair. So it's not going to be a cakewalk, but you also won't feel as though you're not supposed to be playing in that area. There of course are no set parameters to dictate this, but the game does intend for you to struggle a little bit, but it's also not supposed to feel impossible. And that is of course the design philosophy behind the Souls games. Now, the way to access the DLC has been revealed. We do know that we're going to be starting in Mohg's arena and are going to be required to kill Radahn and of course Mohg himself. Now, the recommended level to kill Radahn is around 60 to 70, while Mohgwyn Palace sits around 110 to 140. So if a player is playing through the game for the first time, they'll likely be entering the DLC around that range. That is if they're playing the game as it's generally intended, and the developers know this. In a recent interview, Miyazaki stated, when asked about the difficulty of the DLC, he said, "I think the parametric difficulty level will be based on the latter half of the main game. Fundamentally, the approach to difficulty remains unchanged from the original game. This is true in that you have the freedom to take on threats, and there are also challenging bosses that don't need to be defeated in the story, like Malenia in the main game." So going based off this, of course Mohg is a second half optional boss, but the raw difficulty of the DLC is going to sit around that level, and the level of locations like Farum Azula and Miquella's Haligtree, which have their ranges anywhere from 110 to 150. And the DLC will also be on a range like that. It's not going to be on Malenia level difficulty, as even with the DLC, she is still going to represent that pinnacle challenge, and you need to keep that in mind. If you have a character that's beefed up so powerfully that Malenia is a joke, then you should expect the DLC to be a joke as well. And for me personally, I wouldn't want that experience. But there is a precautionary measure in place in Shadow of the Erdtree. Another thing Miyazaki mentioned in that interview was that the DLC will be taking a page out of Sekiro's book and introducing a secondary leveling mechanic. When asked if there were any elements unique to the DLC, Miyazaki stated, "System level up elements limited to the DLC have been added. I think it's easy to understand if you imagine something like offensive power in Sekiro, but apart from the conventional levels, there is offensive power that is only effective in the DLC field. This was prepared for the freedom to challenge threats that I mentioned earlier, and it allows you to say things like, 'This boss is tough, so let's explore another area and try again after becoming stronger.' This makes it easier to experience even at high levels." Now, if you have never played Sekiro, there was no traditional level in that game. You of course had ways to upgrade your health and receive more lives, but the only way you ever did more attack was after killing a remembrance boss and leveling up your attack power. Now, the information pertaining to the DLC is a bit sparse at the moment, but the general consensus of how this is going to work is under the impression of a character debuff, where even if you're level 100 or 300, it's going to feel the same once you get in there, but as you gain these upgrades, whatever they are, things become more in line with how the main game feels at your current level after you've collected all of them, or however many are required for each different boss. So essentially what this is the same level scaling that we talked about earlier, but applied through these different upgrades instead of your character level. Say for example, you load into the DLC, and the first boss you fight feels on par with a boss you just fought in the main game. Then you get to the open area and start exploring and come across another boss, but you barely do any damage to this one. That's your cue to leave and go seek out another area and find more of these upgrades. Now, mathematically, it's impossible for your character level to play no role at all. With the way weapon upgrades and scaling works, the safe assumption, I believe, is that once you reach the appropriate upgrade level for a certain area, then it will be as if the upgrade system doesn't exist, and it will apply your character level for whatever the average is for the DLC, likely around 1 to 150. Now, that's pure speculation on my part. That's how this kind of system has worked in other games. We ultimately won't know for sure until the DLC is already out and we can run the numbers. Now, the reason this system is in place is to provide a sense of progression for people that are already high levels, which is a very good thing. It's been a hot topic of past FromSoftware DLCs, where people have gone into the DLCs with maxed out characters, steamrolled everything, and basically made the experience obsolete because there was no progression besides the levels they already attained in the base game. So no matter what level you are, you're still going to have to seek out these upgrades, and there will be that sense of progression, but if you want the intended experience, you probably want to stay somewhere between 100 and 150. That's not to say you can't enjoy it at the high levels, but I think generally a good rule of thumb is, if Malenia is still a hard challenge, then the DLC won't be too easy, because there is likely to be 1 or 2 bosses that are on her level, in terms of general difficulty. Now, all of that was in context to regular New Game. If you're on New Game Plus, then of course you can afford a few more levels. And one of the reasons you may want to do that is because of the additions of the new weapons and weapon types. If you're staying around level 100 to 150, you're probably not going to be able to use all of the new weapons, at least without respecking and using a larval tier. But if you're pushing 200, then you'll be able to experiment with just about everything. And you can easily just run the game in New Game Plus in order to get that additional challenge. But another reason you may want to stay around 100 to 150 is if you intend on doing PvP or multiplayer. The most common multiplayer matchmaking happens around those levels. I like to enjoy a lot of PvP, and I found the quickest invasion times to happen around level 130. And we don't yet know how the DLC is going to innovate on multiplayer, so I want to leave that option available, at least on my main PvP character. Of course, there is password matchmaking, which bypasses level caps, so if you're not interested in invasions, then that's something you don't have to worry about. So let's wrap all this up into different ranges. So because of this new system that the DLC is introducing, things are no longer black and white. However, we can say that if you want the most genuine experience, the way it was most likely intended, and to enjoy the most active multiplayer, aim for a level between 100 and 150. This does appear to be the intended level for the DLC, so if that's the experience you want, that's the range you should stay in. Now, going above those levels is going to give you a different experience, one with much more freedom. You won't be limited to a single build, you'll be able to try everything new, and you'll be able to tackle the fights in different ways depending on bosses' weaknesses or the way in which they fight. And if you still want to preserve some of the difficulty, you have New Game Plus as an option. Personally, I'd recommend if you're going to be over 200, give an extra few New Game Plus cycles. But thankfully, due to the new system, you are still going to have a form of progression. So what level should you go into the DLC? Honestly, whatever you want, but consider the factors we discussed. Anyways though guys, that is going to do it for the video today. Let me know down in the comments section what level will you be going into Shadow of the Erdtree. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.